right. Well, folks, it is 3 o'clock. We are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Cassandra Cruikshank. I'm an environmental biologist for KYTC. I work in the main office in Frankfurt. I have districts, for now, I have districts 1, 5, 6, 10, and 11. So some of you may know me. On the horn here, I got Mike Smith, who's our roadside environmental state administrator. You won't be seeing his face today, so don't be too confused if you see my face and Mike's voice. We are here to talk to you about pollinators in KYTC. We have a pollinator initiative that is going through KYTC right now, and the current and future policies and plans for pollinators with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. So let's get started. So why pollinators? Why is KYTC getting involved with pollinators at all? Well, as a state affiliate, KYTC recognizes that pollinators actually have a lot of importance to Kentucky. They are a foundational part of the food web, and Kentucky, which is mainly considered an agricultural state, is reliant upon pollinators and pollinator habitats for our agricultural base. Around 70% of the world's most commonly cultivated crops have to be pollinated by pollinators in some way, shape, or form. So we are aware that if pollinators are suffering, or if species are going extinct or being put onto the endangered species list, that may in turn hurt the economy and the entire identity of a great amount of Kentucky. So we are sensitive to that fact. Another reason that KYTC is involved in pollinators is that we're kind of the ideal form of government that could take on pollinators because of our available space. Kentucky has over 27,500 miles of roadway, and right-of-way in certain places is actually ideal to put pollinator habitat into because it allows for these large connected swaths of pollinator habitat. One of the problems that can be seen with pollinator habitat and as far as pollinator breeding is genetic diversity, and these small pockets of pollinator habitat can be isolated. And that's not necessarily good for insects reproduction and encouraging those populations to get back up to what they used to be. So for the idea of Kentucky to provide its right-of-way has this large connectivity and acres and acres and acres of potential pollinator habitat that we could help these pollinators bounce back. Some of the things that actually benefit KYTC in particular is that it's aesthetically pleasing. A lot of people, especially the general public, are becoming very aware of how important pollinators are. And there's a lot of the public who actually wants to see their local government get more involved with helping out pollinators. And as you can see from these photos and from other photos that we'll show you in our presentation, it can be this really beautiful, kind of a beautification project. Another thing that we've taken into consideration is that the less of mowing we do, the less expensive it is to mow. Some of these pollinator plots will only need to be mowed once a year as opposed to 5 or 6 times a year that we were doing. So there is a financial benefit to KYTC being involved. Now, from my end of things, I actually work with concurrence and compliance with Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act, which basically means that on any project that has federal funding, we have to be in line with the Endangered Species Act. And some of the species that are on the Endangered Species Act list are, in fact, insects. The rusty patch bumblebee was listed about 2 years ago now. And the monarch butterfly, which is this, most of you have probably seen a monarch butterfly or understand that, they're a very popular, very well-known pollinator species. We've been following their population decline, and we now understand that it's not a matter of if the monarch butterfly is listed as an endangered species, it's a matter of when. So this is something that we need to get ahead of as far as compliance with Section 7 and our mitigation anyway. So we're trying to integrate all these other concepts into our pollinator initiative. So the pollinator conservation strategy is something that I was involved with. Ellen Mullins, who some of you may know that name, this is something that she really takes a good amount of credit for. It's basically this agreement between KYTC, FHWA, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the Kentucky Field Office, and it's been an initiative as a proactive measure to promote pollinators and their habitat within KYTC roadsides to get ahead of the federal listing of pollinator species under the ESA. And that basically means that if we can create a large amount of pollinator habitat as a way of getting ahead, we can then remove potential pollinator habitats on future construction sites and fall back on these new sites that we have created as a way of complying and creating habitat for the Environmental Protection Act. So that's another reason that I, in particular, in my area of expertise, are involved with the Pollinator Initiative. So when going into the Pollinator Initiative and talking about creating all this habitat, we knew that there were going to be some concerns that the public and other people at KYTC might have. Most people came up with, well, does it make a lot of sense to create this habitat adjacent to roads? Won't the impacts and collisions with cars, with all of these pollinators, actually be detrimental to the populations? Will it actually help those populations grow? And some of the studies that we've looked into actually show that there's little to no significant difference in collisions when it comes to pollinator habitat or if it's a grassland monoculture. There's no significant incline or decline. It's about the same. Another thing that, particularly here in Kentucky, people were worried about was collisions with wildlife, specifically deer, because that is one of the main collision type incidents that you can run into in Kentucky. And we actually found that a lot of studies are showing that deer actually prefer the monoculture grassland because that grass that has been cut maybe 1 to 2 days prior is very succulent. It has a lot of nutrients. It has a lot of water. So they are far more inclined to hang out in an area where you have just mowed the grass less than a week ago than you are where you haven't mowed the grass in 6 months, because deer are browsers. They're looking for that more succulent type grass situation than they are like high stem, anything like that, any type of woody kind of thing. And then, of course, we are aware of the fact that there are some places in Kentucky where it's just not going to be appropriate to put pollinator habitat with these higher standing plants because of line of sight. There are going to be some areas where it's tight corners or it's too close to the road, there's not enough right of way, and we are taking that into consideration for each site, the safety of the public and anyone driving on the road. So putting the strategy into action, how are we going to do this? What exactly are we going to do? Identifying existing quality habitat, doing all that. We understood that we needed to get involved with a group of people that maybe knew more about the pollinator habitat that was already out there and could help us identify it. So for this portion of the slideshow, I'm going to hand it over to Mike, and Mike will tell you all about the things that we've been doing in the past year.
Thanks, Casey. I appreciate everything that you've done for pollinators and everything that the Division of Environmental Analysis has done. Until we got you all involved, we're really on a different level now that environmental analysis had gotten involved with the pollinator conservation. We had known back in 2014 when the presidential executive order on pollinator protection was issued that we had some areas of good quality pollinator habitat on our highway rights-of-ways. Our roadsides were not just biological deserts of tall fescue monocultures, but they were abundant, although not highly diverse floral resources there, from clovers, crown vetch, partridge pea, even some weedy species. But there were some things there that were beneficial to pollinators that were in our existing seed mix. The white Dutch clover is an excellent pollinator resource for, particularly for honeybees, but also for many native bees as well. Recent University of Kentucky research has shown that the nectar from these non-native flowers is actually just as nutritious for the pollinator insects as the native flowers are, and it is often available when the native flowers are actually dormant. So there is some benefits to some of these other plants. Of course, the native pollinators do require native plants for forage for the caterpillars. In the case of the butterfly, they do, such as the monarch butterfly, they do require the native milkweed, also for shelter and for egg laying, building a nest in, and so forth. So when we started out, we knew that we had a lot of work to do to restore these native plants. We initially started out, we really didn't have any dedicated funding for establishing these pollinator habitat zones. We were using some beautification funds initially to establish some of these zones across the state. We relied on our partners at Roundstone Seed, a nationally recognized seed supplier based here in Kentucky, for species recommendations for our seed mix to develop attractive, diverse, native pollinator habitat with emphasis on milkweeds for monarch butterflies and full season blooms for other pollinator species. And managing these pollinator habitat zones is a completely different game than managing tall fescue turf. Most of our roadside environment staff has backgrounds in production agriculture, turf management, or horticulture, production horticulture. So natural lands management is an area that we've had to get up to speed on through attending workshops and field days from UK, from Roundstone Seed, and from other local, state, and federal agencies. Now, when we convert existing roadside vegetation to pollinator habitat, it requires us to eliminate all plant competition. Now, the Native Americans and Mother Nature used fire and other disturbances of the soil to do that. But we, of course, we can't, we're not in a position to use fire on roadsides at this point. So we have to use multiple applications of non-selective herbicides. An ideal site on the roadside would not have any perennial weeds such as Johnson grass, Canada thistle, hemp dogbane, buckhorn plantain, etc. But these are very common weeds on our roadsides, and often they require additional herbicide treatments. At least one full growing season may be required to prepare a site for seeding. This is, you know, it's a slow process. People get impatient and expect instant results, but that's not what you get with these native plants. It takes years to establish them. Once we are satisfied most of the weed seed has emerged and the weeds have been controlled, we no-till seed a pollinator seed mixture that's best suited for the site conditions, i.e. a wet mix for wet conditions, maybe something that may be suited better to dry conditions where you have thin soil, etc. Typically, the first year of blooms will consist of the annuals in the mix, such as sunflowers and some of the smaller perennials. It's usually not until the second or third year that these these flowers really come into their own, and you have something really showy. And of course, there is maintenance required on these sites. Selective herbicides may be needed to control these problematic annual weeds such as giant foxtail and mare's tail until the native species are more dominant in the plots. These herbicide applications may require dedicated spray equipment because a lot of these native plants are extremely sensitive to a lot of the herbicides that we typically use for weed control. So they may actually require dedicated spray equipment that has not had any contaminants in it whatsoever. Mowing can also be used during the establishment year to reduce the competition from these annual weeds. Soon after beginning these pollinator habitat zones, we asked our Office of Information Technology to develop a simple application for monitoring and tracking these sites because we wanted to be able to keep track of them. When you're dealing with sites all over the state, it's easy to lose track of them. And so they were very helpful. They built an app for us using the collector platform that would allow us to inspect. We could make management recommendations. We could also inventory the sites and add to them as we added sites. They have done several upgrades of this app, and it has greatly increased its ability for our biologists to look at the habitat quality of different sites also. Next slide, please. Until the Division of Environmental Analysis was able to identify some funding for a statewide survey of our roadsides for pollinators, there had never been any inventory of roadside pollinator habitat or any statewide right-of-way plant surveys that I'm aware of. We knew there were lots of common milkweeds on roadsides, but had never really looked to see if there were other sites with more diverse remnants of native pollinators. The Division of Environmental Analysis recommended that we partner with the Kentucky Nature Preserves for this work because they had the staff with the expertise, and these survey results would also mutually benefit them as well. It would help to add to their database of the native plants. In 2020, they have already completed a survey which included parts of District 3, District 4, and District 5. Next slide, please. And we've been very impressed with the pace of their work. The preliminary results from the survey, which they're still still doing analysis on these surveys, but the preliminary results was that they surveyed approximately 7,000 miles of road. They used a Survey 123 as a basis for a rapid assessment tool app developed by the Monarch Joint Venture. 149 inspection forms were completed. 62 of these were evaluated for remnant grasslands. 62 paired points of poor quality grassland were identified. 25 poor quality sites evaluated during the initial testing. 24 sites were identified as good or better grassland remnants. As we knew, there was not a lot of them, but there are a few out there, and they identified them and documented those sites. Some of the results of this, there will be an additional analysis and continued evaluation of the scoring system to refine that. There will be a baseline of high quality remnant communities and pollinator habitats for future use. This will help to inform our management decisions to protect important habitats. It will also be helpful with detecting early invasions of invasive plants. And there will also be some training for our district roadside staff on how to identify and manage these remnant grasslands and pollinators in the future. Next slide, please. Now, obviously, if we can just preserve as is or enhance existing habitat by interseeding milkweed and other species lacking in otherwise good sites, there is a considerable cost savings. Some of our best sites have come from somewhat poor soil conditions and less than good drainage. Conversely, some of our most challenging sites from a weed competition standpoint have come from former row crop fields and pasture lands. I would speculate this is due to an accumulation of weed seed in these rich agricultural soils that require repeated herbicide applications over more than one growing season before we can seed them. Also, we are providing more than just plantings for pollinators. We are installing some solitary bee nesting houses and are also encouraging the districts to construct what are known as bee banks for ground nesting bee species as well. Next slide, please. The Kentucky Natural Land Trust has been a great partner for us to use for processing payments for seeds, flowering trees, transplants, seeding services, and pollinator habitat maintenance services with the federal monies. They do a really great job, and this has greatly simplified the procurement and payment process for us. Here's a listing of some of the sites and some of the projects. Here's kind of a 2020 update on some statistics. Even though COVID-19 has shut a lot of things down, there is a lot going on with pollinators in 2020. We have 50 plus new habitat sites under development. We currently have 200 plus acres established or under development in all 12 districts, and we're thrilled about that. That we've been able to get all 12 districts on board. We have 50 plus flower plots or monarch way stations at the rest areas. and these have been installed using both contractor and state force seeding. Next slide, please. Another great program that is benefiting pollinators is our Department of Corrections horticultural program. We several years back partnered with the Kentucky Department of Corrections to utilize their horticultural education program and greenhouses to grow transplants using both collected and purchased seeds. They have the facilities to create the proper conditions required for germinating native seeds, and were able to produce thousands of high quality transplants for us. And these transplants are a significant shortcut in establishing many of these hard to propagate species like milkweed when you're trying to get a rapid result, such as what you like to have for a monarch way station. Some of these things, species, are slow to germinate, and they may not even germinate the first year. So it's been great that we've been able to get the corrections to grow a lot of these transplants for us. We have established the monarch way stations at our rest areas and welcome centers using these transplants, and they have been a big hit with the traveling public, where they can observe pollinators in a more formal landscape setting. And we're planning to collect an even greater variety of seeds this year for the inmates to use for propagation. We are proud of the progress made for pollinator conservation and our roadside maintenance. We would like to now encourage those of you in the project design and construction arena to please consider pollinators in all your road projects where opportunities exist. We feel it is important for the environment, and it's a worthy effort. Next slide, please. And just to end our presentation, we have a presentation of it's a bee's eye view that was captured by some drone video of various pollinator plantings that was shot by Adam Smith of our Office of Public Affairs. And Casey, you want to go ahead and run that, please?
Yep, I am going to, I'll wait till you turn your mic. There we go. I'm going to try to screen share with y'all. Of course, I can't click on this link. So if y'all could just be patient with me for one moment, I'm going to get this pulled up and we will hopefully get this thing running and going. Give me just another second, folks. I apologize for the delay. Well, folks, of course, I'm having some trouble getting that going here, so I apologize for that, Mike. I will see if I can get that running up by the end of my next presentation to show you all, so I apologize for that. But Mike, thank you so much for that second half of the presentation. That was excellent information, and I just really appreciate everything you guys have done and let us get involved with this. We're super excited to be a part of it as well.
Thanks, Casey.
You're very welcome. All right, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the Q&A. Let's see, I see 3:30 on my computer, so I will give till 3:31. If anyone wants to type in their questions now, that's perfectly fine. If not, they can wait until the end of the second webinar that I have planned for you all. I'm going to go ahead and get that second webinar up right now. We have a question from Brad Eldridge. You still with us, Mike? He might have hopped off.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, this might be a good question for you to answer. Brad Eldridge asks, are there programs, resources, contacts, etc., for setting up pollinator habitats in local government lands like county parks?
Not that I'm aware of. I think the NRCS maybe has well, I guess U.S. Fish and Wildlife. There may be some funds available for that. I can send you the name of a gentleman who might be able to help on that, though.
All righty. All righty. Thank you, Mike. All right, I'm going to give just another minute here for questions, and I'm going to get the other webinar pulled up in just a moment.